again, is I'm going to be moderating this session, and we're going to be talking in some pretty good depth around the Tyson story, as you heard a little bit earlier on Matt's presentation with Jeff. So Jeff, I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeff Lough. I'm with Tyson Foods, and I lead our logistics and procurement organization for the company. But much like Tim, I've been in the industry for a while. Started my supply chain career with Walmart and spent about 22 years with Walmart doing retail supply chain work, and then the last 4 years over at Tyson Foods.
Good, so let's get some things started. I think really curious to find out a little bit more about Tyson and how you guys operate your businesses.
Sure, yeah, so Tyson is a pretty old company. The company started back in the 1930s with our founder, John W. Tyson, and really for the first, we'll call it, say, 65 years, Tyson was primarily a poultry company. So started out selling chickens, right, then it evolved to selling the actual protein itself. But over that first 65 years, largely poultry, which you would probably be familiar with your shopping and things like that. Then Tyson really started growing and expanding through acquisition starting in the early 2000s. So 2001, we bought IBP, so that's our beef and pork division. 2014, we purchased Hillshire Farms. So a lot of our branded product that you would recognize happened around that time frame. So think Jimmy Dean, Hillshire Farms, Ballpark, State Fair, a lot of the brands that you think about. We're a $50 billion plus company from a revenue perspective. We sell products in 140 countries. We ship to about 40 different countries. The 4 business units that I mentioned, so poultry, beef, pork, prepared foods, and I guess a 5th technically because we do have a global business unit as well. About 30 billion pounds of product that we ship globally. When you look at some of the numbers there on the screen in front of you, 8th largest private fleet in the U.S., and those volume numbers are representative of our private fleet. So in actuality, it's over 1 billion miles a year from a total transportation perspective, a couple of million loads or a couple of million deliveries every year, and about 50-ish thousand truckloads of product a week, plus rail, plus ocean.
Wow. You have a pretty good experience and a lot of experience with FourKites. How did you initially get involved with FourKites? What did it look like, and what can you share?
Sure. So our relationship with FourKites goes back almost a decade at this point. In the early years, it was primarily focused or largely focused on the domestic truckload market, right? So when you think about the type of deliveries that we make, right, everything is perishable, refrigerated type product. And it's all about track and trace and visibility and knowing exactly where your product is, what status it's in. As things have evolved, right, you start thinking about OTIF and all of the components and fines and things that can be associated with that from a cost perspective. And so it's really important when you for all goods, but particularly perishable goods, to know exactly where your product is when, in order to service the customer.
Okay. And you mentioned customer and getting involved around customer freight early in your experience, I think was important.
Sure.
Right? How did your experience around execution and with that customer-facing interface, right? How did FourKites help your business?
Yeah, so when you think about our business, like any business probably in this room today, we all exist to service a customer, whoever your customer may be. And you don't have the right to exist unless you're satisfying your customer. So our largest customer is Walmart. Many people that provide CPG type stuff, right? Their largest customer as Walmart. And so having worked there for 20 years, I have a very good understanding on both sides of the fence on how important it is to understand, where is that truck? Is it going to be on time? Is it going to hit that appointment window? What's the status as far as the stock outs or the in full component of those things? And as you exceed customer expectations in that space, right, then you get the right to grow your business, to grow your shelf space, to grow your distribution with whomever that customer may be. And so that's where we made our initial focus, and really went deep in that space for a number of years before we started expanding out to other components of kind of as FourKites has grown and matured and developed capabilities to an extent, we have kind of moved along that same path with FourKites.
Yeah, so speaking about moving on that path, right, you've laid a foundation with the visibility, right? You've laid the foundation developing and stabilizing processes. And I think what's important, as we all acknowledge, right, is discipline in those areas is so important. What did you do next?
Yeah.
The FourKite.
Yeah, so right, we started with domestic truckload visibility. In the more recent past, we've expanded to their yard management system. So for those of you who are familiar with Dynamic Yard, we use Dynamic Yard in our business. And so we've rolled out Dynamic Yard, I want to say, to 17 different locations within our footprint. Right now, we predominantly use it in our fresh business, so beef and pork is where we're at. In all of our beef and pork plants, we have Dynamic Yard. We're looking at things from the frozen perspective, but once again, when you think about the sensitivity of fresh product, chilled product, as opposed to frozen product, really having a great understanding of visibility, where things are, whether you're talking about on the yard itself, which is where Dynamic Yard comes in, and then certainly the truckload visibility once you move beyond the yard and what's the status in that space. That's kind of where those two aspects interconnect.
That's, again, I think it's a very logical evolution, right? So visibility, Dynamic Yard, right? You're producing a bunch more data that can be consumed in different ways. You mentioned you had a global business.
Correct.
Right? How do you wire in that global business, and what do you what's your thinking there?
Yeah, so the next aspect and the process that we're doing right now is expanding to the ocean visibility capability of FourKites. And so one of the things I didn't talk about in kind of the intro about Tyson Foods, we have a large export business. We really don't import to speak of. If you think about most companies, right, they're importing a lot of goods. We, on the other hand, we export protein products. We source or procure some imports. If you think about, corn dog sticks and things like that. But from a protein perspective, we virtually are an exporter, or we produce those goods in the country or the region where they're going to be consumed. But there's a lot of things as folks based in the U.S. that we just don't consume as Americans. I would suspect if I could see everybody in the room with some of these slides, if I asked you for a show of hands to say who in the last 30 days has eaten a chicken foot, I probably wouldn't see too many hands go up in the room. But Chinese like chicken feet, right? And so 95+% of all of the chicken feet for every chicken that we produce, right, those go to China. You may or you likely have with you or at home certainly leather goods, right? So when you think about leather goods, we produce a lot of beef products in this country. We harvest a lot of cattle, but we don't do further processing very much in the United States. So you think about all of those hides, they get placed on containers. They go ocean, right? They go overseas to be further processed in various parts of the world. And then there's a number of other aspects of our product that gets consumed overseas. Americans tend to be more white meat from a chicken, poultry perspective than dark meat, though we do consume dark meat as well. Other cultures are more predominantly dark meat, right? So you will see those components of poultry going overseas fairly often as well. So I say all that to say, right, it's very important to us, just like we think about the truckload tracking aspect of things, we need to have a similar capability or understanding relative to our products that are going overseas. Maybe not as sensitive for something that's going to be further processed like a cowhide, but if you think about chilled beef going to Japan, and Japan has very high standards on food quality and all of those things. If you're familiar with that culture, having really good, crisp, clean line of sight and the ability to intervene if sailing schedules blank or different things happen, the FourKites Ocean visibility gives us that capability.
Wow. Again, I think as I learned more from Jeff and the Tyson business, right, I didn't really think of the byproducts and how that connects into a supply chain of its own. And a big percentage of that moves globally, which is just really interesting to learn more about that. And I think, we've got some time, but we've got one more question here that I wanted to talk about. And we heard a lot about agentic and how that can become part of our supply chains, and how FourKites is leading a significant capability in that regard, right? Your next focus, right, around agentic supply chain orchestration, right? What are your thoughts around the experience there and how you might be able to elevate it?
Yeah. So if you think about Matt's presentation up here on the stage earlier in the little bit of a video of me as part of that component, we are in the connect phase, if you will, of the 3 phases that Matt talked about. And so we need to move into automate and ultimately into orchestrate. And now that we've got the domestic capability, we've got the yard management capability, we've now got the ocean capability, that then puts us in the space to really realistically think about automate, right? And so what I would say for those of you, depending upon what your journey is, right, you've got to get your house in order first, your foundation built, if you will, which is where we are. And then that gives you the technical capability, if you will, to then be able to mature into automate and orchestrate. And that's kind of where we're heading as an organization. We use what we have today through Power BI, through any number of other visualization tools to ingest the information that FourKite provides us, and we can get what I'll call near real time on solves. Sometimes we may be able to intervene in time to prevent an opportunity that's occurring, but that's a human intervention that a human has to catch, and you can only catch so many of those. More often than not, right, we're looking in the rear view mirror versus out the windshield when it comes to things like that. We certainly do root cause analysis based upon the insights that we get to try to prevent things. But where I envision us going forward, right, is like a lot of the capabilities that Priya showed up on the screen earlier today. How do you then start using these various agents to automate these different components? Then I can take our very capable team members that are kind of trying to be preventative today and put them more focused on true root cause analysis. So if Tracy or whomever is solving for a particular problem, now my team members can go back, and if it's something that's not a storm or an act of God type situation, it's something upstream in the supply chain that an AI agent can't fix for us. Then I want those team members doing that value-added work of how do we put the preventative controls in place so that Tracy or whatever AI agent doesn't have to fix it in the future, to then further orchestrate and have a better supply chain. I also think about we're in the space as well of teaching ourselves how to build agents ourselves, and so I haven't really named any agents yet. We're not quite there. But one day I want to introduce my agents to FourKites agents, let them chit chat. I'll be happy to stand back and not be in the middle of it. They can solve it all as far as I'm concerned. And that's kind of the vision or the future of what I would expect to see.
Yeah, I'm excited for this evolution. Right? All of us are in this, and all of us are in this journey together. And to the extent that we are all comfortable and and get the support, whether individually, get the confidence individually, right? Get the support corporately, get that confidence corporately, right? The transformation is here, and many of us will be taking that journey at a different level of maturity to others. But it's very interesting to hear Tyson's story, to go a little deeper into their business model, right? And a little deeper in their journey with FourKites. So at this point, we're finished.
Yeah, these are the main questions. I don't know if there's. We've got a few minutes, and we won't hold you up too much. But if there's any questions from the audience, we'd be happy to take maybe a couple, 2 or 3 of those. Yeah, that's a great question. So how do you with acquisitions, right? You have a lot of disparate systems, which was part of the video clip earlier, right? Like we've got multiples of every kind of system that you would have in your supply chain. We have. And certainly that is probably the foundational challenge that we have. And so we have a whole data architecture, data infrastructure, data governance process within Tyson Foods to get everything in for us into GCP. so that we have all of the data in the right places. But what I would, maybe the other aside that I would share with you, probably my biggest learning coming from a Walmart to a Tyson Foods, Walmart largely grew organically. Walmart largely codes their own stuff. So Walmart doesn't have multiple ERPs, TMSs, WMSs, all of those things. When you acquire, right, and I'm sure many of you in this room have that same situation as Tyson does, then you've got to navigate through that piece. And so I'd say the data piece is super critical. And the other piece that I would say is process standardization or process discipline within what you do have, as opposed to too much tribal knowledge, which we struggle with doing a lot of things via tribal knowledge. But it's hard to automate things that are tribal knowledge. You've got to be on process first. And so we've had a tremendous amount of effort in that space. So those are probably the two things: process discipline, if you will, and then data governance, data management. Thank you.
Any other questions going through your minds? Again, I've got a deep passion for customer experience and through the retailer's point of view. I think you've got a background from Walmart, right? You've got a background now as a provider in the protein space, right? How do you see, just give the audience a few pointers on how you prioritize, the evolution with AI through that lens of customer?
Yeah. So yeah, you absolutely have to put yourself in the shoes of where's the customer going, and what does success look like for the customer. And so once again, I'll use the big customer that I'm familiar with. The way I characterize or think about the North Star for our supply chain in Tyson Foods is what things have to be true for you to be fully autonomous. I don't expect us to get there during my career per se, but if every decision you are making, whether it's what we're talking about here for information flow, or whether you're talking about packaging quality and how things move through automation in a supply chain, a warehouse, a whatnot, like what things have to be true so that your product moves seamlessly and it arrives at your customer's doorstep in a way that's super easy for them to consume as an organization, and then ultimately get that to the end consumer. So that's kind of how I think about that aspect.
Okay. Any other hands from the audience for questions around Tyson protein business and migration? Oh, there's one in the middle.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so we do quite a bit of intermodal. I failed to speak about that. So throughout the U.S., very little air, generally not a cost-effective mode for us. So really not considering anything in the airspace. But intermodal could be something now as we think about container movements. If you're moving containers on rail, that's probably an adjacent possibility that's pretty simple. Probably further conversation for actual rail cars themselves that you load out and do that aspect of it. And then on the inbound side, we have not crossed that bridge yet.
Excellent. I think that is a great, the inbound piece is just something for all the operators in the room to think about. If you haven't incorporated, right, these platforms or, going deeper with agentic elements, right, I think that inbound supply chain is something where these capabilities will have immediate impact, immediate measurable impact. So I think it's a great opportunity for businesses in this room. But I think that is it. So I want to thank Jeff for sharing today, and thank you guys for participating as actively as you have in this conversation. So
awesome. Thank you.